Sounds good.
Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's Monday afternoon. I'm delighted to be joined by my Monday compadre, Quinny, and the return of young James French, looking every inch the Arnie Engels lookalike. You're back in the door, James. We will be touching on the performance of Arnie Engels. Overall, Quinny, on a day like the weekend there, what was your thoughts after it? There's so much disappointment because we absolutely dominated possession. We couldn't find a way to get a goal.
Yeah, it was a weird game, wasn't it? Because, also, especially nowadays when I'm watching it, I'm kind of thinking ahead to what the final outcome will be and kind of how the game's been built up across the 90 minutes. And, there was a lot of good stuff on, especially in the first half. I think the first 30 minutes, there was a lot of positives to be taken from a lot of individuals as well as the collective team. But yeah, as the clock just dripped away and the time just went on, and before you know it, it's the game's over and it was 0-0, and it's like Jesus, so it was a really weird one because I put a post out, I think it was yesterday, but we had 27 shots in total. That's a season high. We had 7 big chances missed in the game. I didn't check it, but it's a safe assumption that's probably a season high as well. And a big chance missed, for anyone kind of new to some of my jargon, it's a statistical sitter, is what you call that. It's backed up. It's a proper, should have been scored. Sometimes it's a bit harsh, but, for the most part, that's what it's meant to signify. And yeah, despite all that, we looked okay, actually, on the pitch. I think the stats maybe are a bit kind to us in that way. It wasn't totally free-flowing, all-out attack, but, we certainly had all the pitch to ourselves, and we did better with it than we have in some other games. And even in those other games, we managed to squeak a goal out once or twice. We have had a lot of 0-0 draws this year, but I say, yeah, ultimately, I came away with a weird feeling from the match. It was like a kind of good game, but 2 points dropped.
Definitely 2 points dropped, Quinny. I had similar kind of thoughts on the St Mirren game that opened the league campaign, James, in that one of the games, all the cliches are coming out here, you could play all night and not score a goal. I was getting that vibe against St Mirren. Obviously, we found a way. We found a way to go with it, but the similarities of having a goal chopped off and stuff like that. And I was looking at that at the weekend, James, and I did feel as though, as an attacking force, we looked a bit better. We looked a wee bit more creative. A wee bit like Quinny, we weren't brilliant. It wasn't free-flowing football. But, ultimately we dropped 2 points. So it was a disappointing day at the office for Celtic. I watched the game back this morning, as is the way of these things. I was in Madrid over the weekend, sort of dropped that one in there, gents. And I watched it back. When you've taken emotion out, you know what the score's going to be, and you're trying to analyse what went right, what went wrong. What was your overview of the game, do you think, James?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Quinny, to be honest. It was a weird game in that I don't think it really went along with how a lot of our games went this season. It was like we started pretty well, some high intensity. We moved the ball quite quickly. It wasn't kind of slow and laboured, which is what we've seen a lot of this season. In terms of what we created, I think it was 3 XG to 0.8. So we did create a lot. I had a look at kind of in terms of what we created in each half, and it was pretty even. I think in terms of big chances. So it wasn't we were pushing for a winner late on, and that kind of made it look better than what it was. I thought it was actually a pretty solid performance throughout in terms of what we were creating. But again, it was just kind of not having that final bit of quality, which is obviously as a result of kind of the lack of investment in forward areas, which we're all kind of well aware of. In terms of actually on the pitch, though, I did think it was solid performance. I think one thing I did pick up on was since Chuneki's kind of debut against Kilmarnock, which he was brilliant, against Red Star Belgrade, he was kind of double teamed against Hibs. He was kind of similar. They were kind of really aware of his threat, and that's probably kind of contributed probably to us kind of failing to kind of create as much from that kind of side against Hibs at the weekend. But I think overall, it's positive signs going into Braga. But I think it's a realization of what this season is going to be, that there's probably going to be more games like that where we kind of struggle to kind of convert some of them chances just because of the lack of investment in the kind of forward areas. So it's kind of, for me, is kind of from my expectations going in, I was kind of pretty happy with the performance, but it's just kind of a realization of that's what this season maybe is going to be for in terms of some games, that we are going to have these kind of 0-0 games against sides that set up well against us.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I don't always want to go back to the recruitment, but I do think it's a good point, James, that if you have that magic touch on the bench that you can bring on and the game changer that you can bring on, it makes a huge difference, and it just shows you the lack of depth in the squad. We'll come into that. We'll be looking at some of the individual performances at the weekend. But first of all, let's bring in some of your comments. I'm going to start off with Square Sausage Mick. Only hitting the club in the pocket will make any difference, and most fans don't have the stomach for that fight. We are, of course, talking about the ongoing protest of the Celtic fans collective. We'll be touching on the 12 minutes of silence that took part at the weekend as well. Tony 1888, where I sit in the North Stand, everyone I spoke to had bought the Europa League package. We'll look ahead to the game against Braga as well. Jungle Lion says, need everyone up for it next Sunday against Motherwell. Silence doesn't help the team. And lots of good points coming through. Paddy Lavery, always great to see you, Paddy. Plenty of bright sparks in the comments section. Obviously, you've been reading my taglines. Can Celtic regain the missing spark for Europa League clash with Braga? There was just something missing in our play. And Jungle Line says, how has Paddy not been blocked yet? He's not talking about Paddy Sinnott or Paddy McGilp. He's talking about Paddy Lavery. And I don't know, to be honest with you. I think at one point, Chris McAway tried to block him, but he came back, and I'm glad he is back, actually. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Urban Culture's got his own theory on it. Paddy is part of the inner circle, those who go to secret meetings in Lawrence's pub. Oh, there you go. I didn't know that they happened. Obviously, they are very clandestine in their nature. I'm going to start off then by talking about the right-wing position, Quinny. It's a position that, again, going back to recruitment, something James mentioned earlier on, we don't have an out-and-out first-choice right-winger that you think, happy with that. If you're playing a European game, a game against Rangers, week in, week out, you're happy with the right winger. And a big part of that is down to recruitment. There's no getting away from it, Quinny. You know, we've now got Tunetke and Balikwisha vying for the left wing position. We'll come back to Balikwisha later. And we started with Idah on the right. And see, when you're watching these games, like in a pub setting, which I was at the weekend, you do miss a lot. You absolutely do, because obviously you're in conversation. There's an atmosphere in and around the boozer. You don't see as much as you do when you're at the game or when you're watching it at home with your journal. As sad as I am, that's how I watched it this morning. But having watched the entire game back, I just think that's where Idah has to play now until we get a replacement. Quinny, I don't know how you feel. I just thought to myself, you know, through the middle, he's looked a wee bit of a busted flush this season. He might be able to score a few goals coming in from the wing. He's not going to get a game on the left because our most effective forward at the moment is Tunetke. Idah on the right, how does it look for you?
Well, I actually managed to make it to the press conference on Friday to do the pre-match, which was good fun. And I managed to ask Brendan specifically about this because the last two games we'd had Yang starting, and obviously we know Forrest has been a kind of ever-present in the squad. And it does feel like that's maybe an area of the pitch that's underserved. And as you were kind of setting it up there, I was just, you know, a wee kind of thing went off in the back of my mind is, you remember when we signed Negren, a lot of the chat was, oh, Negren's a right winger, and Rodgers was quite adamant. And we've had this chat with Rodgers before through the press, maybe to the decision makers in the transfer department. If you cast your mind back to him saying, Idah can't play up front like a year ago or something. Mm-hmm. And he kind of had that chat again with Negren, like, no, Negren's not a winger, he's a midfielder. And he has played him there through gritted teeth, and he made excuses for it afterwards. So it kind of feels like, factoring that into a little bit, that any right wing business where we're going to do, the club felt we did with Negren, and then obviously on arrival and evaluation, Rodgers has went, this guy isn't going to be a winger for me because he's not wide enough, he's not got that pace to take somebody on. Not that he doesn't, because he does. He actually did a bit of that at the weekend. He's popping up and even in Europe in that kind of right wing position and making some good threats, but he's not in Rodgers' eyes like the winger in the squad. So I think basically I said to him quite bluntly, are we just playing Yang and Forrest between now until January? And he went back on the Idah comment saying, no, like Dyson played on the right when Jota was on it. And, he kind of harped back to when he was watching as a fan, when Ange was in the building, for example, he was kind of mentioning back in those times. Mm-hmm. And I'm quite with you, like Idah as a striker needs service. You know, he's looked his best when we had Kuhn, when we had Jota, when we had like a free flow in attack and support of him, creating lots of chances for him. But he's not a striker that, he obviously has at different points in his career or whatever, but, like give him one chance and he scores it. He's not always going to be that guy for you at centre forward. And on the left, it's just got really crowded now, hasn't it? Because technically Yang's best position apparently is left wing, so, and Forrest, Rodgers is quite fancy playing Forrest on the left when he's got the options for someone else on the right. So, it's very lopsided, and it's probably going to be Idah now, I think, for the foreseeable.
I think he played okay. I mean, he's had some performances this season, and in particular, the other night in Europe, where I just thought he's so far off it that you're again watching that game with yourself, Quinn. It's frustrating because we know and we've seen what Idah can do. He's got credit in the bank because we know what he can do. But I felt different at the weekend. I thought that he was a contributor on the right hand side. Not ideal, of course, James, but it's all about sometimes I think go and just play your best players. Find a way to play your best players, and sometimes you need to change shape in order to do that. A lot of managers don't like changing shape. But Dyson Idah playing out of position, I thought was quite effective on the right. Do you keep him there, James? That's a big question.
Yeah, I think it's kind of about what you want for each game. Like you seen in the Red Star Belgrade game away, I was kind of got into, I wasn't sure whether they'd kind of sit back with us, whether they'd come at us, and it kind of turned out that we had a lot more of the ball and we were kind of the team that seemed to be in the ascendancy. And that when that kind of happened, we weren't really going in behind. We were kind of trying to work it through the lines, and when we're kind of trying to work it through the lines, where a striker kind of dropped short, trying to kind of create those kind of opportunities, that's not really Dyson's game. Dyson's game is kind of getting in behind, stretching defenses, providing that threat kind of over the top. And that kind of wasn't really on in Red Star Belgrade. I think it's kind of about what you want. I think domestically anyway, I think Idah, Trinecki and Iheanacho is probably our best front three quality wise. But then it kind of going into Europe then, like say if we're going away to Bologna, or I'm not sure if we Feyenoord at home or away, but say we're going away to Feyenoord, like you probably want kind of a really pacey front three, like a three that's going to cause threat behind and be really useful in transition, because we're obviously not going to have a lot of the ball away in Bologna or away in Feyenoord. So you maybe might want to go with like a Yang on the right to kind of get us up the pitch, kind of ball progression wise, have Idah through the middle and then a Trinecki on the left. I think that would offer a lot in transition. So I think it's kind of about what we kind of want on a game by game basis, especially in Europe. Kind of look at the teams on the counter. I think obviously that's Dyson's game when he plays up front, but in terms of domestically, I really think Trinecki and Iheanacho and then Idah on the right definitely is probably our best three kind of quality wise.
Yeah, I'm getting a sense of that myself, and hopefully Idah can kind of play himself out of this wee patch of poor performances that he's had, particularly in the European game where he's taken off at half time. And I do think he played better up the right hand side. So yeah, let me know in your comments what you think about that. Quinny, myself, and James reckon that Idah starts on the right. We're obviously going to be looking at the Braga game on Thursday night and our possible predicted 11s, and I've already given away one of mine. And there was a good, I thought, a good synchronicity, if that's the right word, down the left when it came to the link-up play between Sarra and Trinecki. I thought they linked up really, really well. Like the look of our new left back, Quinny. Is there a way, I'm going to ask you the first question, is there a way of keeping him in the team and also for KT to be in this team? And if so, what do you do with Kieran Tierney? Because I don't think you drop Liam Scales. I know James wouldn't. I know James is a big fan of Scalesy. You don't drop Liam Scales because he's not deserving of being dropped. But what do you do with Kieran Tierney? Because when I looked at Saraki there at the weekend, I thought I like the way that he cuts inside. He does seem to be an attacking force. He loves to be overlapping. And of course, there's that connection that I spoke about with Trinecki. So how do we deal with that? And how impressed were you with the relationship that they seem to be building up very quickly?
I think it's a little bit of, you can play styles for fights kind of thing with the left backs at the moment, because, Tierney does have a very good attacking output. It's just not really got the same volume, or he's not really got it on tap the same as it kind of felt like Sarra had at the weekend. And yeah, I think you just kind of roll with, you roll with it in that sense. I think between the two of them, they're always going to play the 90 minutes because Tierney, although he did the 90 against Partick, it's not going to be something he does regularly. And with the amount of games we've got midweeks and weekends and whatever, there's definitely going to be plenty of opportunities for Sarra to start. So I think it is really just picking, who you fancy for each game one at a time and trying to make the best option. There's a lot of flack for Rodgers in the comments from the game at the weekend, and I kind of accept that or go along with that in terms of the substitutions and how the game kind of evolved second half. So I think we could have done a little bit better, maybe just sticking to our guns a little bit longer before going to the bench. And one of the things that's always in the chat is talking about changing shape and all that kind of thing, which I think could work in a lot of different ways. I think, you could imagine a really good Celtic team with a front two of Iheanacho and Idah playing as a kind of front pair, and if you're going to do the whole 3 or 5 at the back, Tierney is the left-sided, of the centre backs, and then someone like Sarra. Or you could even go to someone like Taneke, because I think it was Alan Morrison, or it might have been someone else on Twitter, but someone said that when we signed Taneke, he profiles like really well as like a wing back because he's really good defensively, like winning the ball back and whatever. And if the link-up play that you mentioned that him and Sarra had at the weekend, they were really close to each other, like positionally on the pitch. They were never too far apart. And you could imagine him being quite effective, getting the ball from back to front in that kind of left wing back position. What you would do on the right, is maybe another discussion. Your likes of Donovan's and a few other guys that maybe could fill in that role. But I think that's probably the only way it could work, because like Scales isn't going to get dropped at centre back in a back 4 for Tierney. I just don't see it, unless it is like Livingston at home or something like that, where we're going to have 95% of the ball, and it's like, okay, we could just leave Vickers by himself with Schmeichel to play a game of dominoes or something while we have the match going on. So I think it's just really a styles for fights kind of move you do between the two of them.
That is interesting, and I tend to agree with you, but with regards to the shape, Quinny, I think we're all resigned to the fact that it's not going to happen very often. I mean, I always look at games like the weekend where you could revert to a back 3 and go all out to get that goal, because Hibs hadn't really shown. I know that very, very late in the game there was a chance. In the first half, there was a chance for them to take the lead, which would have been shocking when you look at just how little attacking that they had done. But I do think we need to be strong and believe that we can win these games, even if you do change up a wee bit, your shape. Because I think part of the issue that we've got at the moment is predictability. These teams are working all week on their defensive game, and you could probably analyse the game. I didn't today from a Hibs perspective and say how well they defended. It was just relentless attack after attack, and Hibs got into a kind of groove with it, Quinny, where they were quite comfortable actually defending against us. So maybe try something a little bit different. How impressed were you then, James, with our partnership down the left-hand side? And actually, with one eye on Thursday night, who did we play at left-back, do you think?
Yeah, I think I have been pretty impressed with Sarra since he came in. Obviously, like he came in under not the best circumstance in terms of like how we kind of recruited and how we got him, obviously through kind of agent relationships and stuff. And I think he was kind of in a bad spot. I think that Boca Juniors wasn't really getting played. So kind of your expectations for him coming in, he's going to be a good backup, and that's kind of about it. But I think he has shown that he has quality to kind of really affect the game for us. He's looked pretty good going forward. I was kind of surprised that I think it was the cross for the Idah goal a couple of weeks back. Brilliant cross, and kind of that kind of early cross, I thought, giving us something that we haven't really had a lot from the fullback areas. I think it's always kind of about Johnson kind of getting out to the byline, Tierney as well, and kind of hitting the Sarra kind of hitting the early cross. I think it's just another kind of outlet to our attack, which is kind of nice to have. And in terms of who starts Thursday, I think Tierney not playing at all at the weekend is kind of indicative of probably Rodgers just resting him completely. So he's kind of primed for that Braga game. For me, I think it still has to be Tierney, but I think Sarra has definitely shown that he can even be a really good outlet to even come on off the bench in games where we're chasing, we're looking to get a winner, because he has shown that he has that kind of quality in the final third to kind of really provide a chance for one of our attackers.
He definitely has, and he did really well when he hit the bar as well. He is an attacking force. The only concern, and I'm not trying to look for negatives here, Quinny, I'm going to go back to recruitment. We don't have an option on this guy. So it's very short term again. And it's very similar to the Jeffrey Schlupp scenario or Alex Baye, where you're bringing a guy in. Neither of the two, for me, sufficiently impressed in the entirety of the time at the football club. I think there was some moments that Alex Baye played, you thought, I can see the potential in this kid. And then there was there was a spell actually of Jeffrey Schlupp where I would have kept him, and then he went completely off the boil, probably the second half of his time at the club. This time around, if Sarra was to keep this kind of form up, we're going to be kicking ourselves for not having a clause in that contract.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't think it would. I would hope it's not going to be it would be a deal that wouldn't be too hard to strike, because I think I might be wrong, but I don't think Boca Juniors even paid any money for him. I think he might have been a free agent when they picked him up, and they were the ones shopping him about on loan. They also don't want to carry his wages anymore and don't have a place for him in the squad. So And again, like when we got him, the number one thing on his record is like his injury history. Like he's never really had long periods of, being fully at it. So again, failing some sort of miracle season he has with us, hard to imagine a queue of people show up at the door for him as well. So I don't know. I'd be more hopeful, but the club do need to be proactive with it and get in front of it. And if he's happy, to do this whole job share thing with KT, and for as long as KT's here, we've got somebody like him to just handle the whole left back department, then that's really good business. And that's the same sort of sentiment for keeping Taylor in the first place, is you just want someone that knows that situation, and really it doesn't matter what game it is. So we're already talking, like people are saying in the chat, Saracchi for Europe, and that's what you want, someone that's just about on the same level, and some people are even maybe saying he offers more. I would highlight though, although everyone's talking about Saracchi being really good in attack, when he came off the bench in the Derby match, and even when he's played basically every match he's played in so far up until this point, his main contribution has been defensive. When he's come off the bench, he's just coming on, shoring things up, and giving it, he's given away some fouls and stuff, but they've been fouls to make. They've been the best thing to do at the team. So he's definitely a guy that can read the game, and at 60, 70 minutes, if we're bringing him on and it's tight, Rodgers is telling him fly, then we know he can do it. And if it's don't give anything away, again, he's got that about him as well. So he's more than a one-trick pony, I would say, in that sense.
That's a great point, because the one guy we spoke about a lot when he was at the football club was Alexandro Bernabe. And my biggest concern with him was that lack of defensive quality. He was very good going forward. Remember, he scored a goal that he laid on himself in a pre-season friendly.
Yeah,
he was very quick. He was good going forward, but defensively, I thought he was suspect. So it's great that Saracchi might have that in his locker. That's good to know. The Urban Culture, you're back in and you say, looking forward to today's show. No Acsom or Celtic since Thursday. Well, you're back and I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to tell you about my trip to Madrid, ladies and gentlemen, right? I'm not blatting it, but let's be honest, right? See if you're a Celtic fan that's followed the club all your life, and then all of a sudden you've got an opportunity to go and visit the Madrid Emerald CSC for the 25th anniversary, and your travel companion is Charlie Mulgrew. You're going to take it, right? And that's exactly what happened at the weekend. It was phenomenal. Went over. They treated us really, really well. Got a chance to spend a bit of time with Charlie, chatting all things Celtic, all things golf, because he's got a new golf stroke football channel on YouTube and so check it out. But another thing I wanted to speak to him about was that there is a habit or a tendency for ex-Celts to dive in on Celtic studs up, right? And as soon as they do it, it's almost as if, right, that's you're on that naughty step, and you're an ex-Celt, but we're not really keen on you. And there's lots and lots of people in that category. And one person who's avoided it, actually, whilst still being very critical of the club, is Chris Sutton. So I think that is very much a skill in itself, that he's managed to be critical and balanced, yet he's still not derided as an ex-Celt. And in actual fact, we're going to be with him. Check out the linkage there, Quinny. We're going to be with him in Greenock next month, 31st October. I think that's Halloween. But we do gigs on Halloween. So if you want to dress up, feel free. Plenty of geysers will be there on the night. Tickets are on sale. The link is underneath the video. The biggest geyser will be on the stage. That's me, absolutely blarting it like I did with Charlie. So anyway, I spoke to Charlie Mulgrew, and we spoke about the kind of impact of some of the comments he's made recently in relation to the board. Because as soon as he said, the board do a good job at Celtic, a lot of people, Quinny, are like, right on it. Right, you're a rat. You're a board apologist. You're this, you're that. So we spoke about that kind of reaction, and Charlie is anything but. I mean, we had some really good, deep conversations about his time at the club, his relationship with the board, etc., Quinny. And he's anything but a board apologist. You know what I think it is? We talk about every nuance of Celtic, every single missing banner from the stadium. We will talk about it. We talk about the threads. We talk about the players. We talk about the past, the present, the future. We do the whole thing, and we do it every single day. I think what the issue is sometimes is that an ex-player comes along, and he's obviously part of the punditry teams in Scotland, Quinny, having worked with Sky Sports, Premier Sports, etc. And when he's asked that question about the board, I think what happens is these guys genuinely don't have the same forensic knowledge of what's going on than guys like you and me who talk about Celtic every single day. I think genuinely and authentically that is a situation. So what he sees is maybe from the outside looking in saying, well, we spend all this money and we win all these trophies, so how can you say they're doing a bad job? Whereas you and I could list 8 reasons why we think, or more, that they're doing a bad, or 7, which are the questions that have been asked on the open letter. As yet, no response. So I think that's what it's down to. I'm not in here to stand up for anybody, Quinny, but when you hear it from both sides, you get a sense of, actually, maybe he doesn't know, because all he's seeing is the success. You're not convinced.
Like, you know, I was listening to, I can't remember who it was over the week. Somebody was chatting about over the weekend how we've scored 8 goals this season. This time last year we'd scored, or I can't remember the numbers, but we scored like a fraction of the goals this year on last. All we've did is sell players, you know, so it's quite, I don't know, like, fair enough. You might not know where Callum Osmond is at the weekend, and you might not know where all that stuff is, but you know that we've sold Kyogo and Kuhn and O'Reilly and all these other players that just haven't been replaced, and even Idah in and out the door over a year and everything else. So, like, yeah, I can kind of understand a little bit, but, you know, if the comment is like the overall, like, everything that the club's doing, then yeah, fair enough. I can accept a lot of those types of people probably don't know all this, you know, the pain that it's definitely felt in the live chat in this show when there's another kit release or, you know, this type of stuff. You know, I can definitely get along with that. But in terms of just the overall, like, the top bird's eye view of where we're at, I think that's the easiest thing to probably get your hand across, and it is upside down. You know, all we've did is sell goals, and you can really see it in the team, you know, from the season so far. I think 4 0-0 draws this year. And when you see the amount of goals we've let walk out the door without really being replaced, you know, we're really, if you think about the money ball aspect of it, we are really, like, crossing our fingers and toes that Ian Achill's get 20 goals a season in him, because if he doesn't, we're, you know, we are in a lot of bother in a lot of ways if we've not got anyone that can get to that number in the squad. Maeda doesn't look like he's really firing at that level like he was last year, and outside of those two, who are you even talking about in the conversation for that?
That leads us actually into quite a few different points, Quinny, because with regards to selling goals, because I want to, one of the guys you mentioned who scored 20 and had a few assists last season is Adam Idah, and I want to ask James about him, because James told us all about Adam Idah when he signed for Celtic. The other issue that I can see coming, and this actually was my next discussion point, was Arne Engels and the comments that Brendan Rodgers made around goals, Quinny, and the fact that Nygren's ahead of him because Nygren's bringing goals from open play. So I think it is really relevant. And absolutely, if you were to look at the goals that have left the building and the players that you've mentioned, we simply have not replaced them. And the goals for column shows that this season. And the amount in the Hunting's draws show that as well. And we can't do anything about that until January. And that is a deep concern. I'm going to start off with Adam Idah then. Going to come to yourself, James. In its entirety, Adam Idah Celtic career had lots of highs, lots of high points. He's written himself into Celtic history, into folklore, by being a man who scored a winning goal in a Scottish Cup final against Rangers. Absolutely, that cannot be denied. People will argue the toss as to whether or not he was worth the money, but he's left. He's gone, and he's away to Swansea City. If you were to look at his career at Celtic and analyse it and rank it and rate it, where are you with Adam Idah?
Yeah, I think you can give the break into a couple of parts. Like I said at the time that Adam Idah probably wasn't worth the fee we paid for him. The reason we paid that fee was because we were haggling over the price, as usual. But I kind of said at the time he wasn't worth that. He obviously, like, last season at the club, I thought, like, he came up for us in a lot of big moments. Obviously 2 goals away at Villa. He kind of had like these kind of streaks of games where he'd score for a couple of games and then kind of go off the boil. I thought his performances in Champions League were actually pretty good as well. I think he finished with 3 goals. I think it was 3 or 4 goals. 20 goals obviously overall for the season, but he kind of failed to be consistent enough to obviously nail down the number 1 position. And I think, like, that's kind of been the story of Adam's career, really. He's kind of just always struggled with consistency. That's what's always kind of haunted him. I think he talked to the Irish media about, like, how kind of it ended at Celtic with kind of some sections of support turned against him, but like he didn't kind of throw any under the bus or anything. He kind of said that he was really grateful for his time at Celtic. He really enjoyed it up here, and it's obviously a massive club and the pressure that comes with it, but it obviously didn't end great, and he kind of needed to get out for himself, which is fair enough. And I think to look back on his time at Celtic, you have to say that he came up with some big moments, as I said, 20 goals last season. But I think ultimately he just couldn't really kind of get to grips with maybe the mental side of it. I think Adam is a bit of a confidence player, and when you're up in Scotland, this kind of bubble, when you don't score for a week, the kind of the pressure comes, and I don't think maybe he didn't kind of deal with that great. And it kind of a lot of players struggle that up here. Adam's not alone in that. So kind of overall, I think Adam definitely done more in the Celtic shirt than a lot of guys have been up here. I think he provided us for some big moments, and I think it's probably best for both parties that he's left and gone into Swansea. And I was kind of pretty happy with the fee we recouped from him as well. I was surprised we got the 7 million fee we got from him. So I think in general, it was kind of a good move for all parties involved. As an Irishman, it's sad to see an Irishman leave Celtic, but just the way it is, and then hopefully he can kind of get back to enjoying football with Swansea in the Championship.
Yeah, he did seem like a confidence player. There's no doubt about that. Lubo's Ibrox Party comes in on the YouTube. Let us know what you think. Disagree, agree, anything else? Throw it all in the comments section. Results have not been good enough, says Lubo's Irish Party, Ibrox Party. Brendan can't hide behind the shambles of a board for much longer. See, this is an interesting one, and there's a few comments like this coming through, Quinny. The issues with the board have taken a lot of the spotlight in recent times. We will, and I think we do analyse the performances. The performances have not been good enough, Quinny. But I said a few weeks ago, when the transfer window closed, slammed shut, right? There's no point going on about this now. Brendan has to step up, show us just how good a manager he is. He needs to work with what he's got. He's made some decisions, you can tell without him even talking about it, that certain players are not of his liking, because they're not making the squads. They're certainly not making the Europa League squad. And he's running with a core group that maybe he believes or he trusts. He believes that he can trust them running to the January at least. But there does come a point, Quinny, if the performances and the results don't take an upturn, that you're saying, well, actually, Brendan, we know things went great in January, but you've got more than enough to do better than what you're doing. Is that point now? Has that already happened, do you think, Quinny?
I think it's, I think the number one complaint on it when it comes to like Brendan's impact or his control over the team is, again, I'm getting little kind of flashbacks to maybe like halfway through or the back end of like Ange's first season, where there's no way to throw the kitchen sink at anyone. If you think about the game at the weekend, when he makes the substitutions, he's going like for like, with taking two guys off and putting two guys on. And when you look at the strength and the quality of the bench, when you look at, you've mentioned there, like he's made decisions on people. It's really Shin Yamada's the poster child of that whole episode, that, when you look at how kind of lopsided the team is and all the options that we have available to us to change a game up and to go extra heavy handed on a team. If you go back to the Hibs game, the first substitutions of the match, rather than taking off Engels for Negren and Iheanacho for Forrest, and then Maeda gets moved through the middle, can we maybe just take off like Ralston or Sriracha and put one of those, maybe not Sriracha, he played great, right, but you understand the point, take off one of those more defensive players and put on Negren, and then just go, right, you just get in the middle of everyone else, from where we're at right now. Put another man up there and just, and it just doesn't feel there's any kind of willingness to do that. So with it being so structured for the start of the game and the finish of the game, we've got a right winger and left winger, so on and so forth. Rodgers has clearly decided who can do what for him where, and we're kind of seeing when they're now being used for it. And Johnny Kenny, I was thinking about this before coming on today, I've been quite happy for Kenny to be like striker number 3 in the squad, where the guy, where maybe a game like the weekend you maybe need him for, but ideally it's more your Falkirk, Livingston, Partick Thistle kind of matches where hopefully you're relying on him. But I think when you've seen at the weekend that he is kind of now de facto, it depends on how you think about Maeda now. We were chatting about him being right wing earlier on, the absence of Yamada, but Kenny's kind of now striker too. And he had 2 great chances at the weekend. I'd love to have seen him score the first one, because it was a ball in from Scales, and you just know that would have broke the internet if it was a Scales, the place would have melted. And I was really gutted that he didn't take his chances, but again, rather than saying, well, this is the best choice we've got at this time of the game, is to take Maeda off for Kenny, because that's what happened at the last ebbs of the game. I say, why are we not just throwing another striker on? Why don't we just put Balakwisha on for somebody and tell him just get in the middle of it all, and whoever it is from the bench and just try and up the ante a little bit. And it takes some of the pressure off, because then even for the last 5 minutes, if Kenny's in coming on and we're a goal up, maybe, or, something else could happen, you could make another sub. You could bring, somebody off the bench like a Donovan or something like that to go more defensive once you win it later on. You can do, rather than doing like for like at every turn, you can stagger your substitutions. You see some managers do this where maybe defender for attacker, get the goal back, and then the next one's an attacker for a defender and it resets to where it started. So yeah, that's kind of everything I've got to say on that. I forgot what the question was, sorry.
No, but on that point though, Quinny, I think it makes absolute sense, because Hibs were not an attacking threat, so we could easily click back into that. But it's about, I think, upsetting the rhythm a wee bit, not of ourselves, but of Hibs. Upset their rhythm. They're comfortable at this stage. They're happy to defend. I think they look like a really well-organised defensive unit. So you do something, you create a bit of chaos, don't you? You do the old-fashioned thing and create a bit of chaos. I would love to have seen that. And as the suggestions come in, I'm really keen to get your thoughts on the weekend and everything that happened in terms of the performance, but also the protest by the Celtic Fans Collective. And Ewan Boy Martin comes in. Thank you for supporting the channel. Ewan Boy just wanted to highlight this. Can we scrap the silence? This silence protest, as it does nothing but hurt the team and dividing the fans, in your opinion. At this moment in time, in relation to our involvement with the Celtic Fans Collective, we're right behind all the main aims and objectives of this fans collective. What you will always find, I believe, is that no matter what the action is going to be or the protest is going to be, it's never going to be 100% accepted by the fan base. Nothing generally is, let's be honest. But if you're asking fans to behave in a certain way, then it's going to divide opinion. Absolutely. The 3 sets of silences are underway. That they are going to happen. There's nothing about that's going to change. I think what this is about is to ensure that there is a momentum maintained with regards to the magnifying glass across the Celtic board, constantly, bringing it back to the attention of the mainstream media, the broadcasters filming the game, which is even more important. And it is getting a lot of coverage, even though you might think that particular protest is less effective than that one. What I would say in terms of the visual elements of protest, which I think work so well, is there's a cost attached to them. And the Celtic Fans Collective have no budget. There is no money to say, right, this is going to cost thousands of pounds to do this. So even if you look at, for example, the Partick Thistle one, where you've got all those banners and everybody's holding them up, there's a cost attached to organising that and printing it and stuff like that. So instead of having a visual protest at every single game, they're having to look at other ways. So the silent protest, the visual protest, there are different types of protests. And I think the big question would need to be on the board, because if the boards want to resolve this, they could do it now. They could resolve this issue right now. This is all about their silence, and the Celtic Fans Collective are matching that with the fans' silence. The board can break this. They can definitely break the momentum of everything that's happening. I'm amazed that they haven't yet responded. I'm absolutely amazed that they haven't bothered to even organise a meeting. It's the easiest thing in the world. Let's get around a table. We all want the best for Celtic. You might not think that the board wants the best for Celtic. Let's get around the table and see how we can resolve this. That's not happened yet. And everybody I speak to, because I think it's important as well, that it's not just all us guys in here with the same opinions. James, Quinny, we're all saying, hey, sat the board, and this is what we should do. I think it's also important to talk to people who maybe have a different view on this. And I've spoken to quite a few over the last couple of weeks who maybe do have a different view on how this could be resolved. So go and check out some of the chats I've had with the likes of David Lowe, Paul Smith, Willie Hockey, Duncan Smiley on Friday. Different views, all Celtic fans, all want the best for what's, the future of Celtic. And they're not sitting there being board apologists, incidentally. They might just not share the same views as us. So, yeah, it's a difficult one, Ewan. There's plenty of people who disagree with it in the comment section, and others who do agree with it. Mo Shislak, always a pleasure to see you popping in for a chat. Rogers has used this board thing to bury his sins of the past. I don't think that will last for long, though, because the performances have been questioned. I've got to bring up a comment from Danielle Farrelly. Always a pleasure to see you popping in as well, Danielle. And you're saying that the front three with Maid on the right, Iheanacho through the middle, Tuneke down the left, was the most dangerous we have looked. I tend to agree with that, actually, in recent times. Did everything but score. We've also got the underwater cabbage salesman, 12-minute absence and silence as a pathetic attempt at sending a message to the board, abject like the board. Make a suggestion. If that's your view, that's fine. But what I like if you're going to make a view like that is to say, perhaps try this. Give us another suggestion. And bearing in mind, this is all Celtic fans who have come together really, really quickly, and any suggestion, obviously, is welcome. How better could they do it? Let us know. Robert Highland, Engels has nothing to offer a team when playing against a low block. He can't dribble, has no real pace, and clearly can't shoot. Hopefully, he will do better in Europe. Quinny wants to jump in on that one, so I'm going to throw that one to you first, Quinny.
I don't totally. He hasn't done great against low blocks. I think that's quite fair to say. But I think at the weekend, I was really glad to see him start. I think the first 30 minutes, him and McKeown were very, very good. And it was a big part of the reason why we're leaving the game saying we played better. Engels has got a good range of passing. He's got good energy. And I think the way the midfield was built at the weekend helped him a lot more. I was a bit disappointed, and McKeown was brilliant. And I think he's probably the best of the three midfielders at the weekend that started the game. But I would have really liked to have seen Engels and Negren play together in the midfield to see if that could have been some way of getting maybe the best out of both. I know Negren's doing fine enough at the moment, but I think the thing with Engels, it's kind of similar to Idah, and I've said this before, so sorry for repeating it, but they're not a guy that's going to carry a team, but if the team's working well and doing well, he's got a great range of passing. He's got a really good kind of football brain on him where, doesn't really make rash decisions. He's maybe bad sometimes with the pass. It's a bit off or ill-timed or whatever, but he's athleticism as well. Again, at the weekend, the midfield was quite different because McKeown came in for Hatate, and Hatate normally will come deep and get the ball off the defence. He'll kind of sit with McGregor for bits, and you'll see him kind of link up the play from the back and go forward. McKeown didn't do any of that at the weekend. McKeown was quite firmly an out-and-out attacking sided midfielder, and Engels, starting from the right side of the midfield three, was really everywhere on the pitch, was really covering a lot of ground and helping the ball to get from back to front. Again, I think McGregor was brilliant at the weekend. He played a lot better than what he has this season in a lot of ways. He took the ball in the half-turn regularly, and you would see then when McGregor would drift forward, Engels would just kind of stop the gap for him, so you could go forward and let him do his thing. So there's a bit of contribution from Engels with the other midfield players. Again, McKeown's allowed to stay as an attack midfielder the whole game, unlike Hatate does when he comes back. And that's, again, because Engels is kind of covering some space in and around the pitch. So I think he did okay. At the weekend, he did well. But it's one of those ones that Engels will need 3 games on the spin where it's just like he did at the weekend, but he gets a goal, he gets an assist. And the last thing I'll say is when the ball was out wide, quite often on the left or maybe even on the right, he's very quick to get next to Iheanacho. And again, if you were to freeze frame it quite often, you would see him and Iheanacho could probably have been holding hands if they wanted to. That's how close they were. And for the biggest midfielder on the pitch, for us to be getting in the box is he's getting into some good spots. He's fitting into the team quite nicely. I think it's just a matter of I think he needs to start. I don't think he's going to start Braga, but he needs to start a couple more games. And I said I'd love to see him play alongside Negren. And I think 1 or 2 big games where he hits the back of the net or he carves the team open for someone to get through, and everything will change for him.
Well, he divides opinion, let's just say, Quinny, right? And I've made my views pretty clear on Engels. But on everything that you've just said there, and I'm going to ask James's view on this one, right? I did think that McGregor had a better game than he has done this season. I think Engels' best asset is that passing range that you're talking about. You can pick out a winger, for example, whereas McGregor playing number 6, he's constantly playing the ball back, constantly playing the ball and then telling whoever he plays it to play the second pass, which he should maybe make first. I think Engels, I would love to see it. I don't expect it to happen on Thursday night. I'd love to see him playing. And you say number 6, and then people say to you, well, he doesn't have this quality, doesn't have that quality. See if he's picking that ball up from, say, Scales and Carter Vickers, and he's picking out the wingers, and he's missing out that second and third pass, and he's just picking out the wingers, rather than giving it to your fullbacks, giving it back to the centre-halves, and he's actually putting the defence on the back foot. I honestly think that it would affect everything positively. I wouldn't drop Callum McGregor. I'm going back to play your best players. I wouldn't drop Callum McGregor. I'd play him where Hatate's been playing. And I would play Nygren where Nygren is most effective, which is the second number 8 on the right-hand side. James, what's your view on Engels? I think, again, I've already asked you to give us your take on Adam Idah's time at Celtic. I think in its entirety, lots and lots to be positive about with Engels. This season hasn't got going yet. That's my take. What's yours?
Yeah, I was surprised at how Rodgers kind of utilised him this year, considering, like, I know he kind of divided opinion last year, but I think he wasn't scored 9 goals, 8 assists domestically, something like that, or maybe in all competitions. Like, it's a pretty good return for a centre midfield player, considering it's his first season in kind of a side that's dominating the ball, is kind of the big dog in the league, because he's coming from Augsburg in Germany, where he's obviously playing for kind of a lower tier German side. They were quite direct. It's a big shift in playing style, kind of coming from Augsburg to Celtic. In terms of this season, I have been very surprised at how Rodgers utilised him. I think a lot of people saying like Nygren's like far better than Engels, kind of have this kind of debate between who's better, and I think it comes down to they're just two very different players. I know they're kind of two number 8s fine for that position, but Nygren is that natural box crashing number 8 that can create, can score goals. He's probably more of a 10, to be honest, than number 8, but he is natural in those kind of attacking areas, in those half spaces. And I think Engels, I see Engels as kind of like your quintessential box midfielder. Like, he's gonna get up and down, have loads of energy. He's obviously quite tall, relatively fast, relatively athletic, and he obviously has that range of pass. And I think that those are his strengths. And I think, even from my point of view, I kind of agree with you, Paul. I think he should be kind of even brought back to where McGregor is playing, and I'd even like to see kind of McGregor and Engels play together in the two, and maybe with a number 10 ahead of him like Nygren or whoever. I think that would kind of play to Engels' strengths, to be honest, kind of what he has. But I think in general, I think I kind of would agree with Quinny as well. I think I hope to see him given more starts over the next coming games, just to really show what he can do. But I think it just comes down to that Engels isn't that guy that's going to tread the pass. He's not Matt Riley. He's not going to be like unbelievably inventive in the final third. I think you've seen kind of in the games since he's been here that he's more of a kind of, he'll put on the outside and whip it in, or he very much kind of just drills it, kind of drills to the back post, whatever it is. Crossing is brilliant. He's not kind of an inventive, silky player. He's just someone that's going to kind of just cross into the box, or kind of just drive across the face of goal. Like, and as well as obviously his passing range, he can find guys in behind. I think those are his strengths, and I think if we do kind of let him play to those strengths and stop kind of shoehorning him into this kind of creative number 8, which he isn't, and I think we'll see the best of Engels. But it's just about trying to accommodate him, to be honest, I think, to the best of his kind of abilities.
Yeah, even in his first season, if you think back, there was points of that season where he drops out of the starting 11. By the time that we win the League Cup, he's not a starter in that game. He comes on, and I think he had a good impression. He made a good impression in that game. But I agree with you. I don't think we found his best role. So it's all about playing to his strengths. Jay Conley, Jay Larkin. Silent protests are only a small part of the movement strategy. You're right. You're absolutely spot on. No one expected the board to cave in after a silent protest in 10 days of disquiet. You're right. The fans collective have to be creative. They have to be very creative with this. People think that a silent protest is not. What other protests can you have? Do you stand like a mob outside the stadium waiting for the board members to come in? Do you look at the AGM? Do you have the visual protests? I think that every single one of these methods have already been considered and will be considered moving forward. We're in for the long game by the looks of it, because the board they've not made a move. They haven't said a word in relation to this. First thing for me that they should do, and we know how long it takes them to do anything internally, but the first thing they should do is identify, if they haven't already, the person who was behind the hit piece in the Sun, and remove them from office. There you go. There's the first thing right there. They don't even have to connect that to the fan movement, the fan action, if they don't want to. But I'll tell you something, it would, I think, be universally acclaimed as a good move. That's the first thing you do. And then in the meantime, you start communicating with the fans, and you have a meeting with the fans collective. Simple things. They could do it today. John Sweeney thought the subs killed our momentum. I agree with you. And with Hibs playing with 5 at the back, why won't Rodgers play 2 strikers up front? You've been reading Quinny's mind for the last 25 minutes. Do something different. I felt a wee bit sorry for Kenny at the weekend because I do think he's been thrust into a position that might be beyond him, right? And I'm going to ask James for your take on this as well, James, having watched Kenny in his time when he goes back to Ireland from Celtic. And I've given him credit, James, because to then come back to Celtic, having more or less been thrown in a scrap heap, I think brilliant. You need to be given credit for that. I think he's shown some flashes. I love the way that he will run all day for you in a way that I don't think Adam Idah did. He drops really deep, which I think Brennan likes from his centre forward to create the space in behind. And he does get back in between the sticks for whenever the balls come in. So he's that kind of relentless guy up top who will be low maintenance, who will do everything he can for the team. I just always feel there's a little lack of quality. And I think we've seen that at the weekend. The 2 chances, one of them I'll probably give him a wee bit of credit for because he did well to get his head behind it. He was just a yard ahead. But yeah, from the 2 of them, I would have expected at least a goal. And then we're sitting here and we're talking about Kenny in a completely different light. But I don't think he's done that yet. I don't think he's done something in a game where we sit here on a Monday, James, and go, yeah, he's arrived. He is our second striker. What's your take on the lad? You've watched him since his earlier days in Ireland.
Yeah, I'd be pretty positive about his time at Celtic so far. I was probably always going to say that because he's Irish, but I would be pretty positive. I think like in the minutes he's been given, he's kind of been given the last 15, 20 minutes to impact games. And as we know, even for when Idah was here, like it is difficult to really stake your claim for a pace in 20 minutes, especially as a striker. Because that's nature at Celtic, that's the way it is. But like it can be very difficult. And I think Kenny he's had those kind of moments where he's kind of needed to kind of really impact and score goals, and he just hasn't. I think maybe he's lacking that kind of killer touch, that kind of like real quality that Celtic have had in strikers over recent years. I think he maybe lacks that a bit. But for him, for his progression, like he's came from like the wasteland, like he was kind of discarded by Celtic, sent back to Ireland, and he's kind of forced his way back, scored 5-6 goals in the Conference League. He was top scorer for Rovers there, scored against the likes of Rapid Vienna, scored some crucial goals for Rovers there, and played in some big games. And I think for him, like he's shown best when there's space in behind, when Rovers are playing in Europe and they're counter-attacking and he's going in behind with his speed and his intensity of running and stuff. And I think he obviously comes to Celtic then, and say he's coming on with 20 to go at home to a Livingston or someone like that, someone in a low block. He doesn't get that space in behind. It's very much in the box, and one-touch finishes, have to be alert, have to show that quality. And I think he's maybe come up a bit short at times, which is fair enough given kind of where he's came from in the last year. I think his progression has been really kind of quick, and I think maybe it'd probably be best for all parties maybe for him to get a loan in January and kind of get some regular game time and build on the year he's had, because he's had the year now, 2025, of obviously being second, third choice striker at Celtic, being in that elite environment, and that's obviously kind of going to help him and going to develop him. But maybe I think in January, kind of him getting a loan somewhere, getting regular game time would be best, because as I said, it is difficult for any striker to come in with 15, 20 to go and stake your place for regular game time and kind of score goals. And maybe kind of he doesn't really have that killer touch and quality to do that just yet.
You know, I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but in respect to the January transfer window, the striker position is still an issue, because I looked at the B team lineup just last week, and you know, Inamura was in the B team and Callum Osmond was in the B team, and I'm looking at that thinking, right, did Callum Osmond really leave, you know, where he was playing Premier League B, Premier League 2 rather, down south to come and play in the 5th tier of the Scottish League? No, he didn't. But that's where he is. And that makes you wonder whether or not there's a stamp of approval on that signing by Brendan Rodgers. And I think as fans, you're okay to speculate about that. You look at Inamura. Rodgers has spoken about Inamura saying he didn't have the quality. Inamura's not in the Europa League squad, neither's Callum Osmond. The other striker, Shin Yamada, there's nowhere for him to go at the moment, Quinny. There is no place where he can go just now to play football. So you're back bang into that situation. Simpson Pusey, I don't know if he wants to play B team football, but there's nowhere for him to go if he doesn't either. You're not going to get a game for the first team. You're not going to get a game for the B team. So you're just training. Now that must be seriously, in any walk of life, all you want to do is your job, and you can't do your job. You're just training for your job every single day, Quinny, and at the weekend you can't play a game of football. So Shin Yamada seems to be in that situation, the purgatory, unfortunately, the Scottish football, where if you're not in the first team, you're nowhere. We can't loan him out until January either. So I do think when it comes to January, absolutely agree, Kenny, get him out on loan. I'd get Callum Osmond out on loan as well. Shin Yamada, who knows what the plans are for him, but we do need to bring in more quality up top as well, Quinn. It's still an issue, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. I think, the way Rodgers has laid things out at the moment, I'd be very surprised if Kenny was to leave in January on loan or anything like that, unless, we went and made some more business, because he even mentioned, I might be wrong in saying this, I know he said that about Inamura, trying to get him a loan, but when we signed him, I think he said some comments similar effect with Yamada. And when you see, like, he came off the bench against Rangers in the derby, but at the weekend, he's not even on the bench. It's Kenny, and Kenny's the one that comes off, which is fine. Makes a lot of sense because Kenny is in the Europa League squad, and if you can get a tune out of him, like say if he does take one of those chances, we're talking about him in a totally different light, and we're thinking about his position in the squad in a totally different way. So again, like for Kenny, what is a good season this year? If you zoom out and you try and imagine we're at the end of the year, I'd probably say if he scores more than 5 goals, it's been a pretty good season. And you've got to, again, how often is he likely to start? Very rarely. So you're demanding a lot from minutes off the bench, which, as you guys have already said, isn't an easy thing to just be able to call upon and catch lightning in a bottle with every time. So, he didn't score at the weekend. He's scored 1 this season so far, I think, hasn't he? So he could still have a good season for us. It's just a bit of a shame that he never won us the points at the weekend, and we were relying on him to be the guy that could have won the points. But it's not his fault, it is his fault. He had the chances, right? But I mean, like, in terms of where he is in the squad and our reliance on him. But Brendan obviously fancies him to have something in him to kick on a little bit and to bridge some sort of a gap from where we need him to be and where he is. And Brendan fancies him to do that as a safer bet than probably Yamada, is the way I kind of read it. So outgoing business in January, yeah, Inamura seems quite likely. Osmond seems almost a given at this point. I wouldn't be too surprised to see Yamada. And again, when you talk about like the whole club signing thing and how the club operates, the transfer department, there should be players. And again, I was thinking about this morning when I was out on a walk thinking about the show. But, we've still got Odenholm, who will return in January. He's on loan in America, right? And, see if you're going to sign these up-and-coming players, Odenholms and Yamadas, and take your pick of the bunch from anyone else that was signed over the years. If you've got the sniff early that they're not going to be in the reckoning, they don't suit Scottish football, they're not ready to impact our first team, whatever it is, there should be a much more proactive approach to where would this guy do really well? If we didn't sign him, where would they have probably went? Where's the next kind of step? And again, it's pie in the sky stuff, right? But with Odenholm, like rather than loaning him out to LA in the MLS, why don't you loan him to Bodo Glimt and just say, hey, we'll pay his wages, but we're going to send this guy. And you can, if all he's doing is training in America, why wouldn't you want to train him with some sort of other team in Europe that's maybe like one of these teams in Austria, like your Rapid Vienna's we sent Tilio to or whatever? Can we not get them into a team like that where there's a potential that when they do come back to us, they've maybe learned something, they maybe got better, whether or not they've actually had minutes on the pitch? Because with Odenholm and Yamada, these guys are not getting better. If you think about them as investments for the club to get stock, to like moneyball in the transfer market, let's sell these guys in for money so that we can then go and fund other transfers without selling key players. Is kind of the motivation behind doing that. Then you're just wasting money on them. I know Odenholm didn't cost much. I know Yamada didn't cost much, but they're only getting worse, aren't they? In that kind of context.
Yeah, I know what you mean there actually, because then it will be like sending someone to a club that doesn't suit them. So it's almost like just getting them out your own building. But what they're doing whilst they're away, is it going to benefit them? Certainly for coming back to Celtic. I'm just saying this. I'm not suggesting for a moment that he's going to come back and be a right winger for us. But Lewis Palmer scored again at the weekend. Just throwing that out there. And
I seen a highlight of Palmer, by the way, scoring a goal at the weekend, and he was on the right, cutting in on his left.
He was.
Which was quite interesting. And the main criticism I always had of him was he was never going by anyone. So if he somehow learned that trick, again, you can never write people off in football. I'm pretty convinced Palmer won't come back as a Celtic player, but a right winger is what we don't have. And if you can't deny the guy can shoot and cross. Like, he can definitely do that for fun, So yeah, want to watch.
Maybe if he's gained 5 yards of pace, we could really use him.
Yeah, someone's going to clip that and say Quinny wants Palmer back at Celtic. There's your headline. That's the way. That's the way it goes. I'm certainly not going to do that, Quinny. No way. And McGettigan. Well done to fans who kept the silent protest for 12 minutes. Just a shame some of the fans collective in the main stand didn't join in with sack the board. I was a lone voice in front of the board. Good on you, Anne. Absolutely. Certainly, if you're right in front of them as well. I've seen that there was a wee security guy standing there just in case anybody kicked off. The urban culture, the 12-minute absence generated a lot of coverage. It did. Paul, Andrew, Martin. If we sell our 3 best in the same season, Matt, Kyogo, Kuhn, how many goals and involvement is that? Probably 80% of our total. Definitely going to struggle. You're spot on. And John Watt, Engels needs to be played at a number 6. He hasn't got the pace or skill for anything else. I would like to see it. I would like to see it. Dunhallow LP says he'll start in Europe on Thursday night. One thing I would say, I'm not forgetting Nygren's performance last week in Europe. I thought he was very good in Europe last week. So I would definitely be starting Nygren. You and Boy, you're back in. Why not just sing sack the board for 12 minutes solid? I'm sure that will happen as well. And we've also got Captain Dandy. Engels is a holding midfielder, says Captain Dandy. Should be given a chance there. We're actually an hour in. This is incredible because it's been a very, very quick hour and we've ran out of time, unfortunately. Yeah. All I'm going to say, the final point, and I'm going to throw it to you, Quinny, to wrap it up. Early on, in fact, it was in May. You've got the exact date written down. You tipped Hearts to be second. 40 years next year is the 40th anniversary of Love Street 86. And lo and behold, Hearts finished second in 1986. Can they finish second in 2026?
I think so. Aye. Like, and I was saying this on Celtic Here YouTube channel last week that we need to stop talking about Rangers as like, oh, we're so far ahead of them and all the rest of it. And I think the weekend really crystallised that. So, you know, it's kind of there now for everyone to see, isn't it? But it was, the thing with McInnes, everything about him that you think and all the rest of it to one side, he knows how to recruit players in this league. There's just, I don't think you can argue against that in any way at all. Hearts don't have European football. That's been known since the back end of last year because of how bad their season was. And the recruits that they've made, like, have really all hit the ground running. I don't think any of them have really flopped. And there's a mixture of, like, your Findleys and these types of players coming in. Never mind these other players that you've never heard of. They re-signed Shankland on a big deal, of course. So yeah, it's all about staying ahead of Hearts really this year. Now, how tough that's going to be is we'll probably see over the next month, to be honest with you. I heard McInnes's comments post-match at the weekend, or it was maybe on a podcast or something, where he was saying we're a million miles away from anyone thinking this is going to be serious. But I think he's just trying to cool the flames before they get going, because if you do look at the Hearts squad, their record signing isn't even fit. They've already signed someone for January already that McInnes holds in very high regard and thinks could be a game changer for them in attack, which they're doing pretty well in attack already. And yeah, like, if we keep dropping 2 points to Hibs and stuff like that, like, it could be a real nail biter of a year. I don't think they fall away the way Aberdeen do. I hear everyone keep mentioning that. I just don't think it's the same kettle of fish in any way. And yeah, stop talking about Rangers there in the bottom half.
Yeah, stop talking about them. They're miles away. I think the only thing that might happen is Rangers sack the manager, and McInnes is somebody that they might be looking at. That might be an interesting dynamic later on this season. We'll need to see if that happens. But Quinny said it first on here, and people were laughing. People were mocking. They're not actually laughing or mocking you now, Quinny. I'll say that much. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Way over the 1700 live, which is phenomenal on a Monday afternoon. If you want to come and see Acsom live, we are coming back to Greenock. Always love going to Greenock for a Celtic event, and it's Chris Sutton. He pulls no punches. Live in Greenock, 31st of October. Ticket link is under the video. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved, and thank you once again for joining me, Quinny and James, on A Celtic State of Mind.